Okay, fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. Thank you so much for your patronage. If you're supporting us on Patreon, thank you so much if you have connected your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account. Remember to re-link those, re-up that link every month or so. We get paid every month that you remember to do that. And if you're a YouTube subscriber, we appreciate it. All those are getting us paid, so Shane can afford to keep producing these. I'm not getting paid, but I appreciate that you're allowing Shane to give me a forum. All right, today's question from YouTube from M Dubs, comma, that means two guys, and Carl 595, I guess two people. What will Nintendo do to counter the success of PS5 and Xbox Series X? Almost all its big franchises have been released already for the Switch, so it's running out of options. Will Switch's sales be impacted by PS5 and Series X? Will Nintendo release a more powerful model to minimize the performance gap? Does it need to? I have never had a meeting with a Nintendo CEO since I've covered this sector for 20 years. And I met Mr. Iwata once. I was 10 feet from Mr. Furukawa, but he was too busy playing, Wii Tennis or Smash Brothers or something with Reggie. So he didn't want to, I said Furukawa, Mr. Kimishima was playing with Reggie. But Mr. Furukawa, to his great credit, reached out. And so I had a call with Doug Bowser, Mr. Furukawa, and Mr. Furukawa is a wonderful gentleman. And I asked him something like this. I asked him a question like this. And, I share his view. I always have. Nintendo is a different experience. And yes, they make video games, and yes, they make consoles. And the consoles are not as powerful, but they're different. And, I think that just the Switch itself is different. I mean, just the idea that you can play it as a handheld or as a console. I got a lot of venom and vitriol from doing an interview about why I thought that Nintendo might be smart to just go all handheld all the time. And all the people who use on console said I'm a complete idiot and Nintendo would never do that. But it's partly because of your question that, they're not as good a console experience. The graphics aren't as good. There is a perception that if they want to compete with Xbox and PlayStation, they're going to have a 4K, at least 60 frames a second, probably 120 frames a second, super high def console. And that requires more power, and that requires a new design, and that requires different software. I think the answer is they're not doing that anytime soon. And I think that Nintendo has carved out a pretty solid niche. So I think that and again, I don't think that they think of their niche as inferior or even necessarily competitive. And I'm kind of going to roll back to the Iwata, comment about Blue Ocean and we don't want to compete with the sharks and stuff. It isn't a blue ocean, but blue ocean just means that you're the only predator in the sea and nobody's competing with you, and you're not going to get bloody. In a red ocean is everybody's competing against one another and killing everything in sight. I think you're right. I mean, I think that they do compete, but they don't compete to get Call of Duty players. They compete for wallet shares. So they compete for your dollars, and they certainly want to sell you their console. I think that there's only two types of Nintendo console owners. Either you only care about Nintendo, and that's the only console you own, and you don't care about other software developers, and that's a minority of Nintendo console owners. Or you care about all games, and if you want to play Call of Duty, and you want to play, FIFA, and you want to play the Psychonauts, which Microsoft just bought, or you want to play the next Elder Scrolls game, which Microsoft just bought, then you're going to buy a console from Microsoft or Sony. And if you care about Nintendo, you're going to buy a console from Nintendo. So I think the vast majority of Switch owners own more than one console. They own either a PlayStation or an Xbox, and they own a Switch. And a lot of console owners really care about Last of Us or really care about Halo. And so if you really care about a Sony only exclusive game, you're going to buy that console. If you really care about an Xbox exclusive game, you're going to buy that console. The vast majority of gamers who don't care about Nintendo, of all gamers, is really more interested in Call of Duty or FIFA, and those are on both consoles. So they pick one. They pick a PlayStation or an Xbox. As they discover Nintendo software, they buy a Nintendo console as well. And again, I'm not going to argue about whether you start with the Nintendo console and then branch into the others. I mean, certainly if you're playing only family-friendly, E-rated games, of course you start with Nintendo because they make more of those. And then as your parents allow you to play M-rated games, then you buy Call of Duty. I mean, of course, but or Cyberpunk or whatever. I think Nintendo understands that it is, if it's the primary console in a household, it's either because the player only wants Nintendo software or because they want Nintendo software first and they want other software they can get on another console. If it's the secondary console in the household, it's because somebody really wanted to play FIFA or Madden or Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed and want to play Nintendo software, and they're fine with that. And so I actually think, because there are more than one gamer in each household, typically, there's room for both. And I think Nintendo's goal is every household should have a Switch console. And I think that that's smart. So the answer to your question is, I don't actually think they care. I mean, I don't want to make this too cavalier. They care about the consumer experience, and they will launch a next-gen console when they think that the time is right for Nintendo to make Nintendo first-party software that looks, graphically stunning in 4K, and they're willing to make the investment and build out a more powerful console, and they're willing to make the investment software and build out more powerful software, and that's going to happen. But it's not going to happen because Sony and Microsoft did it. That's not the reason they're going to do it. And they're not going to do it to compete for third-party software support. They would like to have third-party software support. They acknowledge that it's a different, game development exercise for Microsoft and Sony, and so it's costly for them. And they acknowledge that they need to do better. So that, I think, is going to happen too. But I don't think it takes a new console to do that. I think Microsoft and Sony can put, if you can get games like Skyrim on the Switch, you can absolutely get, current generation games on the Switch and old generation. EA and Activision and Ubi can do that. And if Microsoft can offer stuff like Game Pass with catalog titles, Nintendo could do the same thing. I mean, they could absolutely offer, a service like that. So, we'll see. I don't know what the ultimate outcome is going to be, but I would say making a new console, they're on their own timeline. They're not on Microsoft and Sony's timeline. They are not concerned about competing. So your question, what will they do to counter the success? I don't think they care. I think that's like saying, what will Marvel's Avengers do to counter the success of Avatar? But I don't think they care. What is McDonald's going to do to counter the success of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse? They don't care. They're different experiences, and they're both food, and they both compete for your eating dollar. But steakhouse and a burger joint aren't the same. And I don't even want to make it into Nintendo's inferior. I mean, food is food. But Microsoft and Sony are probably more like Whole Foods Market, and Nintendo's probably more like Kroger grocery stores, but they still sell the same milk and water and vegetables and meats, and they're all the same. I mean, they really are. So, Microsoft and Sony just have, a little better valet service, and they cost a little more, and what the hell. So I think Nintendo's actually figured out its niche, and I think they're fine with it. What I think Nintendo could benefit from, which is not a console, is a migration toward supporting free-to-play gameplay. Fortnite's on the Switch, so it will really be good if you get, games like Apex on the Switch or games like Call of Duty Warzone on the Switch. And I think you can. I mean, I think all those things will work. So what'll make the Switch, I think, more attractive, appealing to the Microsoft and Sony consumer is getting all those free-to-play game experiences on there and having cross-platform play with all those free-to-play gamers, so that the Switch owner is playing with the Xbox owner, and they're in the same alliance or the same squad in Apex, and they're talking, and they compare. I think that really helps cross-sell the consoles. I think that's about the most enlightened thing any of the console guys have done is allow free to play. Thank you for joining us on Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. And if you're a Patreon patron, we really appreciate it. Our Twitch Prime customers who have linked their Twitch Prime account to their Amazon Prime account, thank you, we're getting paid. Our YouTube subscribers, thank you, we're getting paid. Everybody else, thanks for indulging us. Have a wonderful holiday and New Year's. And please follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter.